Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell Mendez. Welcome to Books I Should Have Read a Long Time Ago, desultorily chosen based on how I felt at the time, but probably should have read them sooner for whatever reason. At this point, it's probably the I should have read this because somebody should. I being the only person out of my circle of friends who's actually going to be plowing my way all the way through this. So, it's a reason, and this, of course, remains the Arabian Nights, not the annotated Arabian Nights, but in point of fact, the original translation of the Book of the Thousand Nights and a Night by Sir Richard Francis Burton, translated by Sir Richard Francis Burton back in 1885. So, Book 3. Book 3 does, of course, pick up where the last one left off, because that's how this works. None of these books are going to end on a neat and tidy note, because that's obviously not how the 1001 Nights work. But, this one, it picks up where the last one had left off as we continue the incredibly trying and bizarre tale that had started with a young prince who was jealous of the notion of his father having another son. And by the end of that, we've kind of completely forgotten where we started, and the prince's younger brother's son winds up having various misadventures because the king regent, as opposed to, him who was supposed to be king following his father's death, that he got driven out of the country. It was a whole thing. Anyways, that story eventually wraps up. It just, takes a while and has endless twists and turns. But this book, one of its key features is a lengthy series of animal stories that, at the start, give one the impression of Aesop's fables. They're not Aesop's fables. For one thing, the moral of the story in each case tends to be, occasionally the moral is strange, occasionally the moral is somewhat obscure, and sometimes the moral gets overridden in the mind by a question of, but what was the point? You've made your point about your moral, but I don't understand why this happened. A good example of this is the tale Shahrazad tells King Shahryar about the flea and the mouse. And so the story goes roughly that there's this flea, and it's hanging around a merchant's house, and it decides to bite the merchant and drink his blood, because that's what fleas do. But he bites the merchant so hard and seriously that the merchant kind of flips out and calls all of his servants in, and they go on a hunt to find the flea of evil doom. And the flea decides to hide with a mouse, and it asks the mouse to please let me stay here. I promise not to cause any trouble. And the mouse says, okay, you can stay if you don't cause trouble. So the flea moves in with the mouse and does not cause trouble. He still goes out and drinks blood, but he doesn't, lose his mind and start, basically gnawing on the man, which was apparently what got him into this trouble. Anyways, and then the merchant manages to earn himself a whole whack cash. And he brings all of these denarii home, and, it's a huge amount of money, and the mouse looks at it and says, I want all the money. And the mouse says to the flea, I need you to bite him just enough so that he'll leave. Not, permanently leave his home, but just, not be in the room for long enough that I can steal all the money. And the flea's like, yeah, but you're a mouse. It's a lot of money. How are you going to do that? And the mouse says, oh, don't worry about it. I got 80 mouse holes around the room. I can just stuff them all. I mean, it's coins. I can stuff a few coins in every single mouse hole. I'll have all the money. And so the flea bites the man several times until he decides that he's going to sleep in the hallway outside of his bedroom, because at least the flea won't be in there. And so he goes to sleep, and he leaves his bedroom unattended, so to speak, and so the mouse goes in there and steals all the money. And so yay, the end, the kindly turn of the mouse to the flea, uh, grants him the boon of the flea's assistance with stealing all the money. One just wonders, what is the mouse going to do with the money? Because he's a mouse. He can't walk up to a merchant and say, here's a dinar, give me an orange. He can't, buy a new scarf. He can't he's a mouse. So, he wanted all the money because why? It's weird. So you have that story. And, and then you have the story of the fox and the crow, which opens with one of the darkest, most grisly openings I could have imagined, in which the fox had apparently fathered several kits over the years, but because of the environment he was living in, he would have starved to death if he had raised the kits, so he ate the kits instead, and that made him feel bad. And it opens like this, and you say, what is happening? Where are we going? And the fox approaches a crow on the presumption that a crow, being a bird and, having bird abilities like flight and stuff, would be able to maybe help the fox with getting enough food so that he could father kits and raise them instead of having to eat his own children. And the crow says, no, you're a fox. Foxes are sneaky, and they're predators. And you're a sneaky predator, and I'm not going to let myself get eaten by a sneaky predator just because he's trying to give me some sob story. And so they go back and forth, and they tell each other various stories in an attempt to convince the other that his position is right. The crow eventually wins the argument, and the fox weeps and wails a bit, and the crow is like, well, why are you so upset? And the fox is like, 'cause I'm gonna be hungry, and you're not helping me. And the crow's like, well, yeah, neener, neener. And that's the story. And I'm not even entirely sure what the point of that was, possibly. I mean, it fills some extra time, sure. But it's weird. And equally weird was the story of the duck and the peahen, which it opens in medias res, oddly enough. That is, the duck flails up to a peahen and her husband, the peacock, and tells them the story of why she wound up on their island. And the story of how she wound up on their island is because she wound up befriending a lion. That there had been a bunch of animals who had told the lion that sons of Adam, that is, humans, were coming and they're, scary and sneaky and you can't trust them and we should just avoid them. And the lion said, nope, I'm going to hunt me a son of Adam and I'm going to kill him and then he's going to go away and it'll be great. And so they go through various animals until they finally meet a guy who tells them he is a carpenter, and because the lion either has no idea what a human is or has some kind of thing but doesn't realize that a carpenter is a son of Adam, and he gets tricked into letting the carpenter build him a quote-unquote house, which is actually a big wooden box, or rather a small wooden box for the lion to hide in, at which point the carpenter shut the lion up in the box and then set it on fire. And the lion dies horribly, and the duck flails and shrieks and runs away, and makes her way to the island where she has told the peahen and the peacock this story and says we need to, hide from humans. And the peahen and the peacock are like, it's okay, we're on an island, they're not going to come, it'll be fine. And then the humans have boats and they come, and the duck in the end gets taken, leaving the peahen behind, and she's very sad because she and the duck had become close friends over time, but they talk her out of chasing after the duck because really what was she going to do? And at the end she says rather regretfully that, yes, I mean, the reason that she got caught was because she didn't pray to Allah enough. And I'm not going to make any sort of conversation or discussion about whether or not one should be praying to God or not. I will, however, say that that's not a very good moral of a story in which I don't believe anyone ever comments on whether anyone is making their daily prayers to God. And so it comes entirely out of left field about whether or not the duck is, in fact, appropriately behaving as regards her daily prayers to God. That if you're going to do this, if you're going to make that some sort of a moral, at some point in the story you should probably have somebody say to the duck, you know, you should be praying more, so that when you get to the end, you don't say, and the duck was taken, not because humans are sneaky, but because she didn't pray enough. Because it's weird. And so there's that, which is a significant first portion of this. The second portion returns to a much, much longer story that goes through a great many twists and turns, and has left off in the middle at the end of this, which is a story that starts with a prince and a princess in two different countries who each swear they'll never marry, and then when their parents get upset and stick them in towers, that a jinn and a jinnah find the two of them and sort of fall in love, and then basically bring the two of them and lie them down side by side so they can compare them and say, well, is your guy prettier than my girl? I don't know. Let's look at them side by side and see. Anyway, so the two of them wind up, like, he wakes up and sees her, but they kept her asleep, and he falls in love with her while she's asleep, and then he lies back down, goes to sleep, and she wakes up, and then they keep him asleep while she falls in love with him, and then they put them back in where they were before, and the two of them wake up and freak out and ask their parents, where's the attractive person that was in my room? I want to marry them. And the parents are like, in both countries, the two kings are just like, you sound crazy. Nobody was in your room. You've just lost your mind. So the two of them go on incredible travails and eventually get together, and then they get separated again, and then they get together again, and then he gets a second wife because of it's a really long, complicated story, which continues on into the fact that he has two wives, and two sons by these two wives, and each of these two wives fall in lust with the son of the other wife. So, not with their own sons, but with the stepsons. And, they fall in love, and the two sons are freaked out by this, and then the two queens' wives lie to their husband, that the sons actually came onto them rather than the other way round, and then he tries to have his sons executed, and that doesn't go through in a very, Snow White sort of way. So then the two sons have various exciting adventures, and we kind of leave off dangling at the end, at that point. The other keynote in this is that we have started to hear from the outside world again, and there's the story of Scheherazade and Shahryar, that we've started to get some commentary that in between the various animal stories, that the king has started to make requests. He said, oh, that was a good animal story. Can I have a story about birds? Oh, that was a good story about birds. Can I have a story about land animals now? Ooh, that was a good story about land animals. Can I have a story about different animals? Which is how we wind up with all the animal stories. But it's sort of that he's starting to participate. We're starting to get some interaction there. Early on, there was some back and forth between Shahryar and her sister, but that's faded away. The bulk of this, after all, is the storytelling, which just ends at the end of the night basically saying, and she cut off because the night was over. But we're starting to see some bits outside sort of coming in between stories. So, yeah. I think that's all I'm going to say, and at least on book 3, and I will see you all next week.